Welcome to Dutch Customs TV. In this episode we're going to turn this into this. At Dutch Customs, the work that I do on cars falls into two kind of major categories. The first is work that I'm doing for myself, and the second is work that I'm doing for other people. Now, the work that I'm doing myself, I'm not talking about working on my car, my wife's car, whatever. I'm talking about genuine profitable stuff. But when I say for myself, I mean it's projects that I've decided on, as in I'll outlay some money and hopefully turn it into more money. So we've got the Peugeot, which you'll probably see in a future episode. In the future I'm going to want to restore cars or build custom cars, but ones where I decide if I'm happy with the job or not. On the other hand, working on customers' cars is really when we want to go in the future. Working and customizing cars for customers is great. You know, you get to build something that they want. It's a vision in their mind that you make real, which is what I guess hot rodding, or kind of making a business out of hot rodding, is all about. The problem is at this stage, because I haven't got a professional premises or anywhere really proper to work from, and also I'm still learning, is it's always a little bit nerve-wracking when a customer asks for work doing, because I think, what if I get it wrong? What if they don't like it at the end? And yeah, it makes me nervous, and I'd rather be working somewhere with a lift and somewhere professional with a nice sign out the front and all that lot. But that's not to say I'm ever going to turn it down, because you know, you've got to go, haven't you? You've got to work and got to make your money. So that's what we've got today. We've got an E90 BMW 330i from a friend of mine called Adam, and he wants me to build a custom back box. Basically it's a back box delete to make it look better and sound a bit more fruity, and he's got a diffuser that he wants me to carbon wrap and fit as well. So that's what we've got coming up this episode. Enjoy. This is Adam, this is his car. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to size this diffuser up to the back, because what we're going to have is these nice bluey tips sticking out one each side like this. But obviously we need it on the car so we can take measurements as to how far from there to where they're going to come out from, which is that pipe there, and how far across each one is. I'll take the old piece of trim off the back so that I can measure up where this new diffuser thing's going to go, and it'll give me a better chance to see how it looks on the car and how far the pipes stick out and things like that. You can see it just pops on with a bunch of plastic clips. A bit of a fiddle, but in the end, a bit of tweaking around and it should just pop out. Starting at one end, work your way along with a pick and a screwdriver and a couple of bits of steel just to wedge in the gaps. It's a lot of time on my back. There we go, out it comes, pop. What we're doing with this, these are going to get cut off to the point where they meet 3 inches and then welded on. What we want to know is how far out they want to stick. We know how far out we want them to stick. We want to know how far under they're going to go like that. Now they're actually sticking out a little bit too much. What we need is a ruler. That pipe needs to be there, so we're going to take that reference point there and cut 5 centimetres off the end of that piece.
5 centimetres.
Yeah, possibly slightly less. Start off by cutting a small amount off. You can't stick, well, you can stick it back on, but it's easy just to keep cutting it back till it's the right size. Right, so this is how we're going to get this straight on here. Here's one I prepared earlier. This is 3.5 inch. This is 3 inch. So it's ½ inch bigger, which means 1/4 inch each side. And I've made up these little 1/4 inch spacers, which I'm going to weld lightly onto my bench, something like this. So that's going to sit on there, and when that goes in there, that's going to be sitting level, and that should give us a nice exact straight fit. Obviously we can still move that way a little bit, but we can line that up no problem. The next job is, these things are 3.5 inches and we want them exactly in the middle of these slots here. So in order to achieve that, we're going to measure the distance between the slots at the widest point at the bottom, which is 60, wouldn't it, 69 centimetres. So we're going to go, so slot that, slot that. So 69, so 69 from here to here. Now these things are 3.5 inches, which is 88 millimeters, 8.8. So now that's 8.8, which is going to be in there. Right. Now these are 13 centimetres wide. So I'm doing that, 13 goes to that. Now 13 minus 8.8, crap at doing maths in my head, it's going to be 4.2. So we know that we need, there's a gap of 4.2 centimetres there, and then we want half of it because we want to know what gap it's each side. It's 2.1. So these gaps, 2.1 centimetres. We want this to actually slot into the hole I'm going to make, so we can adjust it for length. But we're still going to cut to the inside of the hole to start with. Or the inside of the line, sorry. I take my grinder, just slice the end off. You can see it takes a little bit of fiddling just to deburr it each time, and then have a go, see if the pipe fits in the end. If it doesn't, trim it back a little bit more like I'm doing now, and just keep working your way back. It's easy to take stuff off, but not as easy to stick stuff on. We've cut this one off, deburred it to the point where this will actually slot nicely down in there, but still with a nice tight gap around there so that it won't affect the weld. Now, as I mentioned before, we're going to stick it on those spaces down there, and then you can see down there, literally see whether it's straight or not on the pipe. We've held it up against the car as well, and that actually looks very good. So I'll get the other one cut. What I'm going to do, so that we haven't got too much pipe sticking out into there, I'm just going to mark it up and then measure off probably the thickness of this band, just to give us something to still weld to, and then cut this one off as well. Now here's a tip: for when you want to cut at exactly 90 degrees on a piece of pipe like this, as I said before, I don't have any of the mad tools that you get in a proper workshop or whatever, but these Jubilee clips, once they're tight, will always sit flat on the pipe, and if they're sat flat on the pipe, they're always going to be perpendicular to the pipe. So what we're going to do, we're going to line this Jubilee clip up with our mark. So that was the mark where the outer pipe came to. That's our little bit of extra, just to make sure that we don't cut off too much. We're going to line it up like that, and then we're going to screw that up, and when it's tight, then you'll have a nice 90-degree line to cut to. In this next section, I actually use a hacksaw to cut the bits of pipe. I start it with a grinder, but the hacksaw, although it's not as quick, just gives you a neater line, and it's easier to control than the grinder. I would like a power hacksaw, a decent thing to cut it, but it's a lot easier. And the problem with the tips is it was a sloping stainless polished surface, so you couldn't really start the hacksaw off, so I just used the grinder for that bit. Just going backwards and forwards between the file and the grinder and the bench grinder, just deburring it each time. So that's one done. That's going to slot on there pretty much like that, and I'll show you how we're going to get it at 90 degrees exactly in a minute. But as well as being exactly at 90 degrees, you also need to be the same length. So before I go any further, I'll take the other one of these, and we're just going to mark off exactly where that is on there. I'm going to do that just by clamping these sides together here, so that we know that it's exactly in the same place. Just roll this around here, make sure they're lined up, and then we can mark it up. So we know we're going to the other side of that line there, to the side that lines up with that, obviously. Get the Jubilee clip out and round we go again. Right, so what we've got now is we've got two of these, which nicely match up like that. We also have two of these, which these slot into like that. Now, as I said, what we want to do is get them exactly straight at 90 degrees. So I've got my little spacers, which are going to raise these up 1/4 inch. Now, in order to get them 90 degrees the other way, once I've welded those on there, like that, I'm going to go under there, we're going to push them up against this flat piece of board and push it down like that, so that we know that that is 100% level that way, level that way, level that way. And when we put these pieces on, obviously the bench is going to level it that way. Then we're going to get a 90 degree piece here, which is just going to be a piece of pipe, and once it lays flat across here, we'll know that it's level that way, level that way. So what I'm going to do first, put this on here. I'm actually just going to very loosely draw around it. It doesn't need to be exact or anything like that. And as long as we get those little nuggins in those marks, we know that they're going to be at the bottom, inside, and obviously we've just got to make sure this one is a little bit further back so it doesn't interfere with this when it goes in. The idea here is going to be to tack these three little nuggins on with as little weld as possible, because they don't need to be welded on, they just need to rest on, but they do need to not move around. So here we go. Okay, they're not going anywhere. So now that will rest on there completely flat, because they're all the same height, so it'll straighten out from this corner to this corner. And obviously we can flatten it back against here. I was thinking of welding them onto the bit of pipe as well, but to be honest it's not really needed. So next we're going to take this one, which obviously, as it's flat on there, fits exactly on there like that. And we're going to get a piece of pipe so we know it's at one end, and it will make a nice set square up there. I've got a little engineering set square somewhere, but I can't find it, so that's what we're going to use. Yeah, this is a little obese for the job, but it'll do the job, which is the main thing. So that there is now exactly straight in both directions. I'm going to change the welding wire out in my welder to stainless, which will take a couple of minutes, and then we'll crack on. So what we've done here, we just tack welded it on like that, and that's all we need to do on the little jig that I made up. Now we're just going to go put it in the vise and just go all the way around. I'm seam welding this. It's stainless, so ideally I want to start using pure argon with an argon purge, which will make the welds a lot nicer. At the moment I'm using Argo Shield, which is actually the wrong stuff, and you can see it's not the wrong stuff, but it you have to use the wire brush, as you saw just there, to remove some black build-up which appears on the around the welds, and the inside of it gets a little bit more crusty, which removes some of the corrosion resistance of the TO304 as well. So in the future I'm going to get a proper argon purge set up, and the welds should be a lot nicer, and obviously ultimately I'd like to TIG weld these instead of MIG welding, but we're not at that stage yet. You can see I'm purging it off there, polish it up, and get the wire brush back out again, and that's job done. Okay, so that's these two done. These are the tailpipes. The next part of the job is we're going to take a split off of the one piece of pipe which is already part of the car. So these two are going to become something like that. So what I've done, we're going to put these flat on the base like this, and we know that they're flat, right? So to find the top, just take a ruler across the two, scratch it in like that, leaving you a nice little mark top and bottom, and then we know where to cut, and that's going to be exactly halfway across the pipe. These things was a bit of a pig, because you've got to get a pretty much dead straight line, and you're working on a curved surface in two directions. So I'm using the grinder here because the hacksaw doesn't really like sliding off those curves, and just polishing it back with the grinder, and then filing out the burring, offering it up, see how it fits. It's not a perfect fit. I would love a power hacksaw or a belt saw to do this properly. Okay, so these are nicely deburred. Just cuts as straight as I could expect, really. I need better equipment, let's just put it that way, to do this absolutely properly, but the point is they'll go together. They sit at 90 degrees like that. I think this one's going to need a slight bit of a squash, just because it's a little bit wider where I stuck it in the vise. They'll go together like that, and I'm going to hold them together by using magnetic welding clamps. Now they're not going to stick to the steel because of the carbon content in it, but they will stick to the workbench, and they'll just nudge up against here, make sure that they're in nicely, and then we have a nice T-piece. So in this piece I'm just cutting off a straight pipe. The T-piece is already done here. The straight pipe goes into the swaged piece of the T-piece. You can see where I've welded it and it distorted a bit and it was a bit squashed up. It took a few goes just working it in the vise. I forgot to set the time lapse whilst I was building this. You can see I've got a T-piece there which is made out of two 90-degree pieces, and onto the end we've welded this swaged piece. Swaged means it's puffed out so that you can get another pipe of the same size as this end to slot into it, and this piece is going to be welded to the car. This one will slot on, and then there'll be a clamp there so that it's easy to take off and put back on. And we're actually at the stage now where we're going to take the exhaust, the old exhaust, off the car. We're going to build up a mount for this. This will hang off the end of the pipe which is on the car at the moment, just for now, and then eventually that will be welded on as well. The cut we're going to make is going to be about here, and this piece points directly towards the back of the car. I'm going to try and keep this rubber hanger, but weld this bracket onto the new piece of exhaust, and then I'm going to have to make a support for the other side, which is either going to hang off here because that looks like a nice sturdy piece to hang it from, or I'm going to bring a bar across from this exhaust hanger just so that it's all hung off the same thing. But we'll work that out in a minute once we've got the car back up in the air. Now these pipes have obviously got to be level. We want them to have a nice even distance around here. We want the distance around there to be the same both sides. So we don't want them pointing down like this, up like this. We certainly don't want them like that. Now what I'm going to do, as you can see in here, there's that bolt sticking down. Now there's one on each side of the car, and because they're part of the car, they're completely level. So if I put this in here, I'm going to measure the gap between that bolt and the pipe, and that then will get a distance down to here, and we know that that's got to be uniform across the whole car. So we've measured it up. The middle of the bolt to the middle of the pipe is 90mm. The pipe is 76mm outside diameter, which gives you 38mm from the middle of the bolt to the bottom of the pipe. And the reason it's the middle of the bolt and the reason it's the bottom of the pipe, so I'm going to tie a tight piece of string between the two bolts so that we know that that's level. That will be in the middle, and then we can measure down here, so it'll be 93.8 to the bottom of the pipe. Then we can jack the jack up until the T-piece is exactly 98.8mm from the piece of string, and then rest it on there on the jack, and then that will be our datum to go all the way across to hook these up. Here we are at the point of no return, cutting the old back box off the car. Right, what we're doing here then. We've got our magic figure of 73.2mm, which is the inside of these two tips, how far they've got to be apart. Now, we've measured from 73.2 to the end of this one. This one actually sits directly against the T-piece. We've also measured the distance in from here, which is the same as this one here, subtracted the T-piece, and got this. But what we need to do is make sure that the tips don't stick out further than each other, and that they stay at the right distance apart, and that they're not wonky, pointing in and out. So I've marked these off 73.2 to the inner edge of the line. Same with this one. Now this pipe we know is straight because it's straight from the factory. So we push these two up here. I've got my little spacers, which you remember from earlier on. Now those exhaust pipes are now exactly the right distance apart, and before I do anything I'm going to bring the diffuser up, stick it on top as well. They're upside down, so we know which side's which, and I've got another little spacer here. Now I'm not going to weld in the T-piece yet, and the reason for that is because I don't know what angle it's going to have to be at, but what I want to do is get that in as a spacer and this long piece here, and we'll know when it all goes together, because these tips are up against this pipe and these are in here like that, that everything is at perpendicular to each other, so that it's a nice 90 degrees, and that they'll look right once they're on the car. So I'm going to tack weld them on. I'm going to put the diffuser in before I even do that, and then we're going to get this piece hung at the right height, which we measured earlier on from those bolts. Once that's at the right height, we can offer this piece here back up, and we'll be able to see what angle they need to be welded at. Right, let's show you where we're up to with this exhaust pipe. So this is welded onto the old exhaust. The hanger's just hung on there for now, it's not tightened up yet because we're going to tweak it just at the last minute. We've got the mounting from here on the old exhaust pipe and hung it up on here, so it's using the original rubber mount. Now I was going to try and put a mount to the other side to make it a bit stronger, but actually it's in pretty tough, and that's even before the clamp's done up. So what we're working on now is Adam's given me some carbon wrap for his diffuser, and I've been trying to put it on and it hasn't gone particularly well, I'll be honest. It's the first time I've ever tried vinyl wrapping anything, and it's not a particularly easy job. I mean, it's on there, this piece I'm working on, don't worry, I'm not leaving it like that. But it's a little bit bubbly, and I'm not happy with it, and if I'm not happy with it, I can't really expect Adam to be happy with it. But yeah, look, that's pretty much everything that's left to do on this car. I've got to crack on, finish off this little bit of carbon, a little bit of trim in here, and then fit that back to the car, and then we should be good to go for a road test. And that's it, the job's done. We've put back on the diffuser. As I say, I'm not massively happy with the carbon wrapping, but that's Adam can either leave that on or take it off as he wishes. We've got our nice blue tips. They stick out a fair way. We did try and get them a little bit further under, but it would have interfered with the wheel well under here, and this is the distance we originally decided on having them out. And there we go, so it comes out of the car, that clamp's all done up, splits into two, and the next thing to do, of course, is to fire it up and see how it sounds. So let's call Adam up and see if he wants to go for a road test.
Nice meal?
Yeah, it was, yeah, always.
Yeah, where'd you go? Where'd you go?
Oh, we're at my Mrs. parents' house.
That sounds good then.
Well, I think the smiles say it all. Adam's well pleased, and if he's pleased, I'm pleased, because that's always the thing that I get nervous about, is if I do work to somebody's car, that they're not going to like it, and I'm going to end up having to work even more to fix it, or pay to fix it, which would be even worse. So no, that's good. Job done. See you next episode. That's the end of this episode of Dutch Customs TV. But if, like me, you find the science almost as interesting as the cars themselves, then stick around for the science bit. Welcome to the science bit for this episode, and congratulations if you've made it this far. For today's science bit, I'm going to talk a bit about flow, and to give it its proper name, it's called volumetric efficiency, if you want to get all technical with your mates down the pub later. But when I say flow, I mean how an engine breathes in and breathes out. I'm not going to do the full how a four-stroke engine works, because there's a lot of people have explained it a lot better on the internet, I guarantee it. So just type into YouTube or something how a four-stroke engine works. Guarantee it will come up with a really, really good explanation, better than I can do, sat in an ancient rusting van with a clipboard attached to the back window. But what I want to talk about is how flow, or how the volumetric efficiency can be improved. And the reason I've done this for this episode, well, we've chopped Adam's back box off, so it makes sense, right? So a car, as you've already just googled that YouTube video of how a four-stroke engine works, has four strokes: intake, compression, power, exhaust. So the flow is how well the intake works and how well the exhaust works. And the reason it's called volumetric efficiency is because, say we'll keep it simple, a four-cylinder engine, 1 litre, real bog standard stuff. So let's have a look at one of those cylinders. So this cylinder here is going to have a capacity of 250 cc's, because 4 of those makes up a litre, simples. It breathes in through an inlet valve and it breathes out through an exhaust valve. Here's your piston all the way down after it's finished going down its intake stroke, and it's sucked in every bit as much as it possibly can before it starts to go right up. And yeah, I know I've just put the con rod over to one side, which means it's not actually at bottom dead centre at all, but I'm sure you'll work with me on this. So you think, well, each one's got a capacity of 250 cc's. Surely that means that what it's going to breathe in is 250 cc's. And this is air and fuel mix. It's not 250 cc's of fuel, it's air and fuel mix. And we won't bother with the mixture for this one because it just got complicated. But actually, that's wrong. Because as the piston's going down on its intake stroke, at some point, that intake valve is going to snap shut and it's not going to get any more. You can't breathe in through the exhaust. It's just going to stop. It's going to be like trying to breathe in and then clapping your hand over your mouth and nose. It's not going to be able to do it. On its exhaust stroke, out it goes whatever's left, which is obviously goes out through the exhaust. Now it's got to force that through the exhaust pipe, and again, anything left behind, any of these exhaust gases that are left behind when that exhaust valve snaps shut, they stay in there. They go round for a second run. They get burnt again, kind of. So, to give you an idea of how this works, I've created a really, really high-tech experiment which you can join in with me at home if you really want to, if you're a bit mad like me. So, what we've got, most cars have a paper air filter, so I've got a nice piece of kitchen roll, and most cars nowadays have a nice exhaust that complies to all your emissions and your sound restrictions and blah blah blah. And they're going to go through a muffler here, around a few corners like this, another muffler there, and then you're going to have a tailpipe coming out here, which is going to basically make no noise. In fact, most modern cars you can't even tell if they're running or not. Intake, you also actually have sound boxes on these as well, because an intake's quite loud. If you have ever taken the intake off a car completely, it sounds quite grunty. So it's going to go through this and that and the other, and then it's going to end up in your bog standard manufacturer's OEM paper filter. So, to give you an idea how an engine feels in its normal state, take your kitchen roll and your straw. What we're going to do one of these exercises like you see everywhere, like it's all zen and stuff. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. So for the purposes of our exercise, your nose is going to be your inlet side, your mouth's going to be your exhaust side. Now what we want you to do is roll up these bits of paper. If any of my neighbours are watching this, are going to think I've gone mad. And you're going to stick one up each nostril, like so. And then you're going to take your exhaust pipe with all your mufflers, stuff like that on it. And you're going to try and do the same exercise in through your nose, out through your mouth. Now I guarantee you it's not going to take very long before you start getting dizzy, because you're not getting enough oxygen in. You're not getting a full lung capacity quick enough that your body needs it. Same as the engine. It's trying to get its full lung capacity. Inlet valve snaps shut. No chance. So how do we improve this? Well, this is what I was touching on with Adam's exhaust pipe today. In here you've got catalytic converters, you've got mufflers, as I said, which is kind of here. This is a muffler. This is his tailpipe. Now anything that you can free up from this end and from this end is going to give you better volumetric efficiency. Now on a modern car you've got sensors, electrics absolutely everywhere on every stage of it, and if you mess with any of it then you need to get it remapped, which is when you tell the computer you're going to get a set of figures which the manufacturer never banked on, and I want you to accept them and I want you to work with them. But again, let's leave that mainly for the time being. Let's call it one of the, an old school engine as they should be, with a carburetor and points and stuff like that. So that's our stock engine. This is our modified engine, and we're not going to modify anything in the engine yet. There you go, there's a better crankshaft with it at the bottom dead centre. This time we're going to chop out all the sound boxes because we don't care how loud it is. In fact, the louder the better, right? And we're going to put a big cone on this end, and it's going to be K&N because I like K&N. And on this side, that would be pretty loud, but that's in some ways the best way of doing it. And this is why you see drag cars and things, what do they got? Just a big pipe coming out of the engine. There's people that say back pressure's good. Must admit, I'm not a mad expert, I haven't done lots of experimentation, but I've read a couple of decent books by people who are well into performance tuning, and none of them have ever said that there's any real use for back pressure. You do have to balance your exhaust manifolds so one doesn't start spitting into the other and things like this, but let's just say that that's the best way of doing it. So instead, let's not go completely ridiculous. The cats, unfortunately, now have to be left in for an MOT, honest. And then we're going to put a straight through exhaust. We're going to delete this thing. And we're probably going to delete this thing as well, why not? Or we're just going to put a straight through. And that's it. It's going to be raucous. But what you've got now is a completely unrestricted engine breathing in its full 250 cc's. Or close to. You're never going to get it completely perfect. 100% volumetric efficiency is crazy. But what else have you got along the way here? You've got your inlet manifold. You've got various bits of pipe work. On the exhaust side, you've got your exhaust manifold. And to be honest, a lot of them actually look quite a lot like that. And they're made of cast iron. And the insides are kind of look like that if you were to magnify it, because it's just cast. And that, once you start getting to real high performance, that disrupts your airflow and creates turbulence and reduces your volumetric efficiency, your flow. Same on the inlet side. If you've got that and you're trying to breathe in through that, that's going to reduce your flow as well. So this is why you get these discrepancies where people will buy an aftermarket filter, an aftermarket exhaust, and the manufacturers say, yeah, this adds 20 horsepower, this adds 40 horsepower, this adds even 6 or 7 actually. To be honest, a lot of the time it's rubbish, because you can see if you've got all this on this side but you're still trying to breathe through that, it's not going to make any difference. You've got to be able to breathe in what you're breathing out. And the same, if you breathe in through this and try and breathe out through that lot, you're just going to get back pressure like we did with our little straw. So if you're ever going to improve the flow or the volumetric efficiency on your car, and you want to go out and buy a performance exhaust, and the exhaust says on the box how many horsepower it's going to give you, remember what you do to that end, you're going to need to do to that end, and that's even at the very bottom level of tuning. And if you do decide to tune it up a lot, then you're going to start getting into stuff like that and looking at manifolds and looking at things like this. So there we go. That's flow. That's how you can improve it. That's why boy racers drive around in loud cars. It's not just to make a noise, although The noise is a pleasurable side effect, and that's how it can improve your performance if you get it right, which is what we aim to do. Hope you enjoyed the science bit. Thanks for sticking around. See you next time.